Let me go ahead and put it on the screen. 2 minutes only.
We begin with an attack at a Christmas market in eastern Germany, an event that could impact security measures at holiday events around the world. The NYPD just announced that it will deploy additional resources in New York City out of an abundance of caution. In Germany, at least 2 people are dead and dozens injured after a suspect plowed a vehicle through a crowd. Video from the scene shows first responders and police swarming to the area. The driver's in custody, and we are learning new information about the suspect. It happened in Magdeburg, a city of about 240,000 people, roughly 100 miles southwest of Berlin. Today's attack came 8 years and a day after a man drove a truck through a Christmas market in Berlin, killing 12 people. And ISIS claimed responsibility. CBS's Elaine Cobb leads us off with the details on today's attack.
I want to finish this video, but I just want to make a comment real quick. The way she said, and ISIS, blah, blah, blah. So she was already, leading people to think it's ISIS or at least a Muslim terrorist doing this. And that's what I thought too. And it's an easy thing to think, but this is a newscaster delivering news. That's a little bit different than me thinking something in my head. Right. Anyway, more information came out later, which is that and maybe I'm still wrong. Maybe he's lying to us. I don't know. He's an ex-Muslim.
Well, the fact that she suspected it, that some kind of a Muslim extremist might have committed this, is not really out of character, because there have been several previous incidences where that exact same thing happened at this exact same timing, and so it's not really something that
in Germany in a Christmas market during Christmas,
exactly,
just 8 years ago.
Exactly. So it's really not so far-fetched to make that presumption. Of course, where she got this information from is a little bit bizarre, because there was nothing that pointed to it. However, if I can actually make a kind of a speculation, and I've seen someone post that before, there was the scene of the actual arrest, which was misconstrued by people as the suspect saying Allahu Akbar, when he was in fact saying, I believe, alles klar, which might sound, from the point of view of someone who doesn't know German, that he's saying Allahu Akbar.
Okay, I'm not German. I don't know German, and I know Arabic and English, and I listened to that same video, and I was trying to listen for Allahu Akbar, and I couldn't hear it. And then in the Twitter comments, I saw somebody say even the second mark, they said 18-second mark, 19-second mark. And I listened, it's like, dude, that's not what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then somebody made an obvious point. Even if you heard Allahu Akbar, it could have been somebody else.
Well, it's right now, anybody who might be saying that in any place is basically just trying to ride that wave that this is now.
There's people riding waves a ton. Let me give you another example of somebody riding waves, but on the other side, there's tons of, I don't know about tons, but there's YouTubers, ex-Muslim YouTubers, right, that right away jump to that he's a Muslim. Well, actually, that's the same point you were just making. The person who put out that video, or at least one of them on Twitter, was I think Apostate Aladdin. Sorry, not him. Apostate, the other one, Apostate Prophet. He right away is quick to say it's a Muslim, and there isn't enough information, to be jumping to conclusions like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and finish this video real quick.
A trail of death and destruction in Germany as a car ploughed into a crowded Christmas market in the town of Magdeburg. At least 2 people are dead, one of them a small child. Emergency services rushed to help the injured, at least 60 people, authorities say. Hospitals in Magdeburg and neighbouring cities have cleared beds for an influx of seriously wounded people. Police arrested the driver on the scene. His motivation is
That last scene was that video where supposedly he said Allahu Akbar.
Still unconfirmed. We have caught the perpetrator, said the Premier of Saxony-Anhalt. He is a doctor from Saudi Arabia who has been working here and has been in Germany since 2006. German officials had warned people to be vigilant at Christmas markets, which are popular for holiday gift shopping and family outings. And it's 8 years, almost to the day, since a terror attack on the Berlin Christmas market, which left 12 people dead.
German police believe the suspect acted alone, and they suspect he had an explosive device in the car. Margaret?
Elaine Cobb, thank you.
All right. Let me fix that. Here we go. So, what would you like to say about that?
Well, first of all, the assumption that this was a Muslim is really the easiest thing to think about. There was, I'm trying to think about.
Well, let's go ahead and clarify for people what happened in the past 3 days. So they looked up his social media. Okay, that's an easy thing to do. They could have actually done that while he was saying supposedly Allahu Akbar. Facebook and Twitter, he had been saying to the German people or the German government, hey, it's immigration policies related to Muslims.
Right.
And he's saying there's, I don't know, something like too many Muslims coming in. I don't know how he said it or what he said. And he also said, if you don't act on what I'm saying, then I'm going to harm Germany.
This is and this is something that goes back way to, I believe, the first time he started making statements of that sort was 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So it's something that
so he was saying that for 11 years.
Yeah.
I guess no one believed him.
There was a statement that he said at some point to the effect that aside from harming Germans to make them realize what's going on, what can I do? Anybody please tell me what I can do? Something to that effect. So that was happening for quite a while. And the thing about this is that he started as someone who was trying to help ex-Muslim refugees, people who are trying to
help. Can you go again and explain details of what he was doing?
Right. So he was actually trying to work with some organizations that do provide refugee relief for people who are ex-Muslims. He had some contact with the ex-Muslim organizations in Germany. However, he started going against them, directly going against them, to the point that he was really dissatisfied with the whole situation, that he started putting slander, and they went to court against him. He was basically bullying everybody. And there was actually...
Can you help me understand what you mean? You said he was against them. Who's the them?
Against the people who are actually ex-Muslims. So here's what seems to be the issue with him. So there was a statement that was issued by an ex-Muslim organization in Germany that was saying that we're not against Muslims, we are against extremists and things of the sort. And that didn't sit well with him. He was saying, he was talking about having to be against all Muslims, and that's the issue. He
was helping ex-Muslims while also saying we should be against all Muslims.
Yeah, he thought, when he was thinking about Germany being a haven for escaping Islam, that they're going to be against Muslims, period. And the fact
there's already Muslims there.
Yeah, and the fact that Germany was really open to immigration and was
they took in a lot during the Syrian civil war, right? Or
Right.
actually more
So,
than most countries.
so what was happening to him was actually that he fell into the trap of right-wing politics that was saying that there is a kind of a conspiracy to Islamize Germany.
Oh shit!
And
Listen, I heard this also from other people on Reddit talking about this, saying that it's a kind of a thing that happens more than once to fall into the whatever right wing trap, whatever the hell you just said, where they and so these right wing groups or whatever, they're teaching violence.
so yeah, there is specifically the AFD, the Alternative for Germany group, which is a right-wing group that is against immigration in general. They promote something called remigration, which is basically the reverse of immigration, and he seems to be a strong supporter of that particular group and its ideology.
So there's
And
groups actually saying, "Go do what this man did."
well, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is what they're saying. However, he seems to be promoting their ideology and trying to come up with a way that also sits with his own perception that those Muslims that I ran away from, they're now populating Germany, and so I need to act against that. We need to act against that. That's what he thinks.
So do you think? Hold on. Before I ask questions like what's going on in his mind, let's say a few more things, facts that we know about. Is it true that he's a psychiatrist? And how so he's from Saudi Arabia. He
Yes.
left to Germany by asylum?
I believe so. I think that he arrived in 2006 and just settled down in Germany like a regular person. He had just legal permanent residency, and he ended up being a psychiatrist who works in an addiction clinic. So he basically was helping people get over addiction. So he does have qualifications to do that. However, at the same time, in addition to his work there, he was also he seems to have had this idea, from what I got from other people talking about him, that he was trying to champion the cause of protecting Saudi women as they come as refugees to Germany. That's one thing, but at the same time, he was trying to counteract the presence of Muslims in Germany.
So Hani, who I was just talking to recently on Facebook, he wants to be on one of our episodes, by the way, to talk about Islam and the Palestinian cause. He's an ex-Muslim, and this thing with Germany is related. I think it just got. You tell me what you think. I think it just got harder for all ex-Muslims who are trying to leave their country for asylum or anything like that. Isn't it harder now after what just happened?
The problem with ex-Muslims that are trying to leave their country is that they eventually get bunched up with the Muslims themselves, with the general population, and it's very hard to actually make that distinction between being an ex-Muslim who is undergoing some sort of oppression because of their opinion, and for the fact that they're being persecuted for leaving Islam, and having been put in that same group. It's really hard for them to actually establish that type of case in the West.
So Muhammad says, and he said earlier that he's an ex-Muslim, and he also wants to come on the show to talk, but he wanted to say that he's saying a lot of the supposed ex-Muslims seeking asylum are actually Muslims, and that they just want immigration. I think that's what he's saying here.
Right. So that actually brings up another thing that has been also floating about the situation with this guy Abdel Mohsen, which is the fact that he comes from a region in Saudi Arabia that is predominantly Shiite. So he has a Shiite background. And the Shiites are known for practicing taqiyya, which is kind of a way.
I know taqiyya. So Sunni doesn't have that?
Well, they don't have it as much because you have to see the way that for Sunni being the majority, they don't actually go into the situation where they have to pretend that there is something other than what they believe. Whereas in the case of Shiites, especially in Sunni majority countries, that's actually something that they had to do very commonly. In fact, it is.
Oh, I think I know what you're saying. Let me clarify for everyone. The Sunni is 80% of Islam, Muslims, and Shiite is 20%, and it's been like that since like after Muhammad died.
No,
Those
not
numbers.
necessarily. There
Okay,
was a time
whenever. At some point, it became those numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
For most of the Islamic history, it's been these numbers, and Saudi Arabia is or the seat of Islamic power, if we call it Mecca, it's been Sunni controlled the entire time, right?
Yeah, but there are other places in the Muslim world that have been Shiite for a very long time that you wouldn't expect. So, for example, Egypt was Shiite for a very long time.
Well, let me finish my point. So Sunnis have been Shiites have been being persecuted by Sunnis in this atmosphere. You're the minority. So
Yeah,
you have to try hard to not get killed. And
Yes.
so you have to try harder with taqiyya? That's what you're saying?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
and
taqiyya went into being basically as a kind of a part of the actual faith. So it's something that's it's not something that's extraneous to the faith itself. It's now part of what actually defines a
let me ask some
Shiite
dumb
under
questions.
certain
Okay, dumb
circumstances.
American question. Which sounds like something you'd hear from non-Muslims. The 19 hijackers, the Saudi hijackers for 9/11, 2001. What sect are we talking about for them?
Sunnis.
It was Sunnis.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as I know, there was no Shiite amongst them. They were all related in one way or another to Al-Qaeda, which is a Salafist group, and these are purely Sunnis.
Okay. Huh.
It's only recently, in recent years, that there was a resurgence of Shiite-related activity through Iran, but before that, that wasn't the case.
Activity meaning terrorist activity?
Yeah, we're talking about supporting direct military activity, like in the case of Hezbollah, for example.
Okay, what I think is on everyone's mind, it's been on my mind this whole time. I'm pushing it down to get to it later, but it keeps coming up. How can you tell if somebody who's claiming to be whatever he is claiming to be, how can you tell he's doing taqiyya? How can you tell he's not a terrorist? You know, how do you do that? Should you care a little bit about whether he's Sunni or Shi'i? Because it sounds like what you're saying is maybe there's an extra tick mark you put, another red flag of Shi'i.
Well, okay, so it's very hard if you're trying to apply to this particular situation. It's really hard to determine what this person is, whether there is some lingering baggage that he brought with him that is related to his former faith, that is related to the fact that he was oppressed by the Sunni majority in his country, and then this morphed into a kind of a way to get back at the Muslims that he sees around him, whether there is something that's actually whether he actually is still a Muslim but is trying to put a facade. This seems to have been discounted by people that I've seen talk about him. It seems that he was more confused than actually planning this as part of a taqiyya, for example, if we want to put it that way.
Well, I don't even understand why anyone would be claiming taqiyya here, because he openly said what he's going to do and then he did it.
Right, but it's that exact same sentiment that was expressed by that news presenter at the beginning when she said he must be a Muslim. So looking at the data that we have, how can an ex-Muslim be doing something of that sort? So it's a little bit something that can be considered a bias in a way, that it must be taqiyya because he comes from that background, that it's not conceivable
Right,
that
but
an
as soon as you
ex-Muslim
do any research at all, like about his social media, like Hani is saying right here. By the way, is that how you pronounce that? Hani?
Hani.
Hani.
We're actually friends on Facebook, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'm not sure how we met. Maybe it's through my mom, which is the same connections, you know. My brain farted. It must have been about this. Oh, yes. So you were just saying that at first glance, before doing any research, you might think taqiyya, but as soon as you a cursory research of his social media, in 5 minutes you can figure out it's not taqiyya. He said what he's going to do and then he did it. So there's a much simpler issue here. Why didn't they deal with this? How do you deal with this anyway? What do our laws let us do? So like in the US, if that man was acting that way, saying those things, what do we have in our laws that lets us do anything?
There are so many places where something of that happens, and then in hindsight, people would say, well, it was all over the place. People knew about this. It's just that we didn't pay attention. We didn't really take some warnings seriously, and so on. So it's all something that has to do.
Okay,
with,
let's say they did take the warning seriously. What could they do exactly? Like, are we talking about jail? Are we talking about kicking him out of the country or what?
Well, he was making a lot of threats, and he has been described as a cyber bully by several people. And there was a court case against him about slandering some of those organizations in Germany, the ex-Muslim organizations. And he lost the case. He was appealing against the case, again, talking about the ex-Muslims. Mainly, it seems, as a kind of a backlash that they don't share his hate to all Muslims. He wants everybody to hate them, and so it wasn't something specific that would have caused the police maybe to
Right. He didn't say like he didn't make a credible specific threat about the president, for example, which is an easy way to put somebody in jail in this country. He said kind of vague things. I'm going to attack this. I'm going to harm this country. I mean, even that's vague. I'm going to harm this country. What is he going to do? Write a book? Like, you get what I mean? Like, that's too vague to say. By the way, I got a very. Go ahead.
No, I think there were things that could have been interpreted as specific threats to do some harm, but the fact that he never had any prior history of violent acts.
Probably saw them as empty threats, and people do make a lot of empty threats.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I kind of got one like an hour ago. I think it's an empty threat. He said, return back to Allah before a sword meets your neck.
Yeah. We've
and then I
all
reported it to Reddit.
Yeah. I've had things of that sort. I'm sure everybody who has said anything in criticism of Islam will have gotten some kind of threat of that sort at one point or another.
I ever got one till today, ever.
Right. No. And
although I sort of got a similar one. Actually, I got the same version from my ex-wife.
Yeah. Anyway. The very first threat I ever got was actually from when I was in college, and I was talking to a colleague of mine and mentioned the fact that I no longer believe. He basically said, well, you have 3 days to repent.
This is in Jordan.
This is in Jordan. Yeah, nothing came out of it, of course.
Shit. My heart just did a little.
Nothing came out of it, of
3
course.
days.
But that's what it is. In Islam, you have 3 days to repent before.
No, I get it, but I wonder if somebody said those words in the U.S. Is there a law that lets us put them in jail?
I think at most, if you can establish that this is a real threat, that there's some kind of a credible threat, that you could have a restraining order of some sort. But
I got a restraining order in a similar way, but that's not the same as jail. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because that person can still go do that same thing to anyone else. Because the restraining order is only for me. It's not for the whole society.
Yeah. No, that many people consider this to be a very easy way to silence someone, because they know that there is a well-established history of people being harmed for just speaking out in any kind of criticism against a religion. And so even though if they might not mean it at the time or ever, it's still something that they can throw around just to
well, they actually think that it's making an effect.
Yeah.
They think they're winning with it, and it is making an effect in the sense that it can scare people, and
Yes,
it is making an effect in the sense that a lot of people who see that would actually stop and hide and not do it. But then for somebody like me, it has a different kind of an effect.
And there are people who act.
I'm going to go to court and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, in American society, that's different. But I'm talking about in a Muslim majority country, where if you have enough people making that threat against a particular person, statistically, you might end up with one person willing to carry it over. And
right. And I think what you just said is an example or a similar thing to the scenario with this attacker in Germany. He's in these right-wing groups. They're telling him hate X, but they're not saying exactly how to deal with it. And this guy has his own idea and just takes it a few steps further, but it's along the same goal. You know?
I don't know if he directly belonged to one of these organizations, but what I think is that he found an overlap between what he thinks Germany should be and those groups that are promoting this right-wing anti-immigration policy. And I don't know enough about the AFD to say, well, that seems to be something that coincides with their ideology. But for sure, he seems to have thought that, well, this is what I want to support, and I'm going to be trying to act based on an ideology that promotes this.
Part of what's weird here is part of what led to the right-wing groups being the way they are now is the last few decades that they're responding to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if the last few decades were treated differently, then these right-wing groups wouldn't be the way they are, wouldn't be as bad as they are.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
So part of fixing this is to undo this sort of in a reverse way, and you gotta deal with everything at the same time. And I'm not saying I know the solution, but we definitely should. I mean, we've already been talking about this, these things that's been going on for the past few decades, where I'll just say it very shortly. Muslims are not being held to account in the same way that everyone else is, the laws.
Yeah.
And that's leading to these right-wing groups being the way they are, aside from their own bad ideas that they have. And then this guy does this really weird thing. This is really weird. It makes no sense. Like, similar to 9/11 made no sense. Like, when it was like, what is planes and buildings? What? Nobody ever thought of that. What's going on?
Yeah. It seems to be a kind of he like being under the effect of a certain ideology all your life, being oppressed by it, it's like you start thinking the way that these people think and start using their own tools, which is totally bizarre. Suppose that this thing that he did ended up with him being killed, which is a very real possibility. It seems then that he was willing to die for this, the same way that a Muslim would be willing to die to go to paradise or whatever. So
So
it's
yeah, I said something about an hour ago to somebody. I said this guy still has the same like worldview, philosophy, or whatever that he brought with him from Saudi Arabia. Okay, and I called it Arab culture. But that's not to say that other cultures don't also have it. And I give an example of like Nazism, and I mean not whatever that name represents today, but you know, World War II era, and then the Imperial Japan version, also the same era. And then I started to think about Imperial Japan, and I thought, and just to remind everyone, if you're not even thinking about it, you know, that was a Pharaoh scenario. The people. Okay, let me say how bad it was. At one point during World War II, after Pearl Harbor, after the U.S. got into the war because Japan attacked it without a declaration of war, there was one little story that I saw in a movie. I think this is accurate. It was saying it's truthful, you know, story that a pilot, American pilot, lost his plane, got out, landed. He was in China, which was ruled by Japan at this time. We're in war with Japan, but not with China. Chinese people saved that man, okay, and helped him get to where he needs to go. The Japanese found out. So they said this publicly, we're going to kill, for punishment, 250,000 Chinese people as a punishment for you saving that one man.
mm-hmm.
The amount of, like, if you, we're going to say degree of evil by just amount of it. That was worse than what anyone else was doing in World War II. Not to say they weren't doing nasty shit. Even I think even the U.S. against Japan, at least according to some historians I looked into, about, they were saying that like the U.S. was treating, or the Europeans and the U.S. were treating the Asians or Japan worse than they were treating Germans, because they're a different race. I don't know if that's true or not. But the point is, if you just look at what all of these all these empires were committing, I think Japan was the worst one, even worse than Germany. Okay? In quantity, and then also in that little thing, you know, 1 to 250,000 punishment scale. You want to say something?
Well, I don't know. Trying to compare evils and trying to say that this is worse than that, it's a little bit hard. I mean, death is death, and people are capable of coming up with all sorts of ways to.
Well, the part of the why I brought it up is, though, I wanted to say today they're not like that. Japanese don't have that in them, and I'm curious about how that switched. Okay, and one way that it switched, a couple of aspects about it, is the U.S. nuked them. Okay, those two bombs and and the aftermath of it. I think it let people say, "Oh, my leaders lied to me. My leader's not really God or whatever."
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely sure that there
and then,
was
of course, the U.S. helping Japan afterwards for decades. That was, you know, that was necessary.
Yeah.
And now I don't think anyone in Japan thinks the way any of the Japanese did in the 1940s. When it comes to like revenge and
I don't know. There is also some particularities about the mentality of the Japanese that probably also played a part in this, but definitely the fact that they saw that there was a defeat that showed that this status, the godlike status that their emperor had has been diminished, that definitely had a demoralizing effect, and probably had them reordered the way that they view the world. And
so that generation told the next generation a little bit different story than what the previous generation said to that one.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or not a little. That was sarcasm. That was not a little bit. It was hugely, one was saying Pharaoh and the other one was saying, no, Pharaoh, watch out, don't fuck with the US. It's a sleeping, if I understand correctly, one of the Japanese Navy guys said, we awoke a sleeping giant. Being the US.
Yeah, even before the bombs, there was a significant amount of bombing on Japan, which
I meant before the 2 bombs.
Yeah.
He said that. He knew. And I mean, even the carpet bombing of Tokyo before the 2 big bombs, if I understand correctly, that damaged more of a city than the 2 bombs did, except for if you don't factor in what happened afterwards, the radiation.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, immediate damage. The Tokyo bombing was worse. 70% of buildings were gone. That is huge. And that was worse than what we did in Germany to Berlin.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in World War II, if you want to look at the damage everywhere, everybody was trying to really create significant damage on the other side.
Yeah, and they were doing a lot of lying about how much damage happened. At one point, supposedly the story is the Germans got attacked in Berlin. This is towards the end of the war, and I don't know, something like 20,000 Germans died, and then the Germans, whoa, us, 200,000 Germans died. They multiplied by 10. And from what I understand, and then the other side will do the same thing. However many died, multiply by 10, Same as guys and girls. If you ask them how many sex partners, women divide by 3, men multiply by 3. At least in America. I don't know how it works in the rest of the world.